What's happening, Cardinal Nation? Welcome back to the CardinOLL podcast, a classroom podcast that has been designed to interview expert leaders and gain their insight so we can help take your leadership and your learning to the next level immediately. Let me start off with a great quote today. Far better is it to dare mighty things, to win glorious triumphs, even though checkered by failure, than to rank with those poor spirits who neither enjoy nor suffer much, because they live in a gray twilight that knows not victory nor defeat. That quote was made by Theodore Roosevelt, 26th President of the United States, 25th Vice President of the United States, and former Governor of New York. Ladies and gentlemen, trust me, you don't want to miss any of our guests this month, as we will be interviewing some of the top industry leaders at the university as well as in their industry who are doing and staying out of the gray twilight. These amazing guests are doing a phenomenal work by not letting the pressure get to them or their teams. The CardinOLL podcast Men's Health Month edition this month can be listened to on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Anchor, or Google Podcasts. And you got that right. You know where to view us every Friday, 10 a.m. on YouTube. I, as you can see by my moniker below, am here at the Professor Owens, also known as Dr. C. Sean Owens, with my co-host. He's the one, he's the only, he's the incomparable, Dr. Andrew McCart. Dr. McCart, how you doing today?
Dr. Owens, thank you. It's always a pleasure. I really appreciate that introduction. And Teddy Roosevelt, you know, that's, I don't know where you find all these quotes, but I love them. And I'll just say, so it's my sister's father-in-law that I've become good friends with him. He's one of the foremost Theodore Roosevelt experts in the country. And really? I didn't know this, but Teddy Roosevelt actually saved football.
Yes.
You may have known that as a football coach and athlete. Yeah. So that's great. I'm right at home with that. So yeah, thank you for that quote.
And the reason that I like Teddy Roosevelt is if any of our listeners out here on Fridays at I think 10 o'clock, if you watch Blue Bloods, the commissioner, Frank Reagan, his favorite person to quote is the one and the only Teddy Roosevelt. I am a huge Blue Bloods fan, so that settled right into my spirit really easy today. So, ladies and gentlemen, what'd you say?
They had a different way of talking back in that day. You know, I read Napoleon Hill and he's The Law of Success in 16 Lessons, and he came a little later than Teddy Roosevelt, but it was just the way they spoke then. It was like a higher level of the King's English, as they say.
Oh yeah, and I love it. Right? It's great stuff to memorize. If you ever need time to memorize things, those are great things to memorize. So before we jump in today's podcast with our very special guest, and let me tell you, he is a very special guest that we're going to bring on today. I wanted to let our listeners and viewers know that if you are ready to lead and learn with compassion and expertise, you can save time and money by enrolling in U of L's Bachelor's of Science in Organizational Leadership and Learning. The degree's unique PLA course, or Prior Learning Assessment course, can award you tuition-free college credit for your work experience, where you can save up to $23,000. You heard me right, up to $23,000. Learn more about the value and other amazing benefits of the BSOLL degree. You can check it out at uofl.me/BSOLL-podcast. Again, that's uofl.me/BSOLL-podcast. Now that we've got that out the way, buckle your seatbelts and get ready, ladies and gentlemen, because this is going to be an amazing ride. I want to introduce our special guest. He is currently residing in the great state of Washington by way of Seattle. So he's a West Coaster, and he's been there predominantly all of his life. He's paid his dues as a project management expert, which is why he is deemed by many the authoritative voice concerning project management. He has over 25 years of project management studies under his belt. He's authored the most popular book on project management. He is the president of the Verzuh company. He is a founding board member of the Project Management Training Alliance, PTMA, and he's a certified PMP, which is a project management professional. Listen, all that simply means is, ladies and gentlemen, he's the subject matter expert that the subject matter experts go to when they need an issue concerning project management. Ladies and gentlemen, so go get your pens, get your notepads, your memo boards, your iPhones, your iPads, whatever it is you can tweet, type, diddle, or doodle some notes on, because I want to bring to you our very special guest. He's the one, he is the only, he's the venerable Eric.
John, thanks for that great introduction. My last name is pronounced Verzuh.
Verzuh. That's
Verzuh.
it.
Eric
Verzuh.
Coming to you live from Seattle, Washington. It's really fun. I'm excited about being here on your program. You guys have so much energy, and you know what? That's what turns me on. Is one of the things I've always loved in my career, and this is why I'm in the training business, is I love to be able to stand up on stage and tell people what I'm passionate about. So we're in the right place today.
That is amazing. And so let's get started, because here on the CardinOLL podcast, we don't want to waste your time. We want to jump right into this. So let's jump right into this, into the pool 10 feet deep. Let's start off with this. Management consultant author Peter Drucker said this. He said, management is doing the right things, but leadership is doing things right. So Eric, tell us, how is it that you define leadership?
Well, first of all, you can't put me up against Peter Drucker, okay? He is the legendary Peter Drucker. You got to always say the legendary when you talk about Peter Drucker. But you know what, Sean and Andrew, I've been talking about leadership for so many years and writing about it that I cannot say leadership is. I got to say leadership is many things. I'm going to start. I got a list here I'm going to walk you through. It's vision, because you have to see the purpose of the work. You've got to know why you're doing what you're doing. So leaders understand the big picture. They know where you're headed. That's important because you have to be able to prioritize. You need to be able to say no, and you need to be able to focus. Leaders have values, and they choose their values because they know the values shape the culture of the organization that they're in. And, as we were speaking ahead of the show, we talked about a guy I used to work for, Ross Perot, who was very intentional about the values that he had and the culture that he wanted to create in his organization. Leaders have strategy. There is a path to victory. There are no leaders that people look up to that didn't have victory. Okay, so they got to have a path to victory. And here's my specialty, is execution. Leaders have to be able to get it done. Right? Again, it's all part of, if you're not getting it done, people don't really look up to you as a leader. And then very importantly, character. You have to have a character that inspires the other people. And there's so many important characteristics that people can have, but integrity and courage are two of my favorites. And I'll just share one of my stories about why I think character is so important as a leader. Way back when we had the Constitutional Convention for this country, the silent man at the head of the room was George Washington. And yet people knew his character. We would not have the presidency as we know it, as it was formed. Our form of government with a strong executive was formed because George Washington had integrity and people trusted him to be in that role. And so that just is an example of how important it is to have character. Now that's a long list, right? I've got a long checklist. But so I think if there's one thing you can take away from that, it is that good leaders are intentional. You don't check all those boxes accidentally. You only check all those boxes if you're conscious that that's what you want to do. And so maybe the last one, and this is one I learned from Steve Ballmer, who was previously the CEO of Microsoft, and is that good leaders are on stage and they know they're on stage. And so they are intentional about how they act because they know that people are watching them. Now, how's that for a long list to get us started today?
I love it, right? Because I say this, you are our 23rd, 24th guest. I don't even know the number we're on right now. But what I love about it is that of all leaders, CEOs, presidents, athletic directors, whatever we've had on here, head football coaches, soccer coaches, everybody's had a different definition of leadership. And I love it because it lets I think it lets our students know, it lets our listeners know, it lets the world know that you can't put it in a box. We kind of know what it is, but it takes place in so many different shapes and so many different forms and so many different ways. And depending on how you get to where you get to, or what your area of subject matter expertise is that's kind of what molds it. So I think the list is phenomenal. I love the fact that it has vision, strategy, execution, character, and intentional. And the fact that you got that from Steve Ballmer. I'll share a quick story because before I came to the University of Louisville, I was working in the College of Business, and we were making a shift. And I said, well, the shift had to be about what I call it the battle of the Steves. And they're saying, well, what are you talking about? I said, we want to make either Steve Jobs entrepreneurs or Steve Ballmer's entrepreneurs, guys who can take creativity, innovation, maybe don't have the wherewithal to, or even want to start a business, but they know they're creative enough to keep the thing going. And so that was an interesting. So when you mentioned Steve Ballmer, that was the first thing that jumped into my mind, the battle of the Steves, of how we were trying in the College of Business at another institution. We're trying to create entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs, people who knew how to either take their innovation and go start something brand new, or take that innovation, go work for a company and rise to the top. That was amazing. Dr. McCart.
Oh, please, Eric, were you going to follow up there?
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, well, that's a great list there. I think of that intentional. I'll pick on that one a minute. Being intentional. I taught personal finance for a little while, and we would say you can wander into debt kind of almost on accident and wake up in your 30s or wherever and realize, oh my gosh, there's too much month left at the end of the money. Or you can wander into, as a business, you can get into some kind of trouble or lose market share. But to get out of those situations, it takes intensity and intentionality, especially because you can't be that. Zig Ziglar says you can't be a wandering generality. You have to be a meaningful specific, and you have to find that path out. And it doesn't just happen by accident. People don't rise, as you were saying, to great heights of leadership, or business doesn't stick around for 30 years like the Versatile company. Without hard work and providing value day in and day out. So that's what I thought of whenever you mentioned the intentionality.
Right. Yeah, and I'll just say that, and believe me, I did a little homework on you all too. Okay, I watched some of your programs, and you do have terrific guests. So here's a shout out. If you're watching this one and you haven't watched the previous podcast, go back and watch those too. And as everybody comes up and you ask this question as you start every podcast, what is leadership? And people say different things. Again, to me, there's so many things about it. And because I'm a writer and because I'm a speaker, I have to break things down, and I have to, that tease it out. Go like, so here's my checklist. So there you go. That's how I start.
Oh yeah. But I will say this, intentionality is the unique characteristic, right? A lot of people will mention character or integrity, tell the truth, be honest, be compassionate, this, that, and the third. I think there's plenty of characteristics. I think some of the coaches we've had on have relied on some of that strategy because they're talking about winning and success. But I think what makes your definition different is 100%. If I had to pick one thing out, it would just be intentionality.
Absolutely.
And I love it. I'm asking you right now.
Yeah, that execution piece too. I think I had a teacher that would say, talk doesn't cook the rice. And,
right.
I thought about that execution. You got to actually do something. If it's cooking rice, you got to, in the olden days, carry wood to the stove and light the fire and turn it on. But we've got similar things where we have to do that. We have to make the call. We have to make the connections. We have to build the course. We have to write the first edition and then the 5th edition of the book. I mean, I've been impressed with, some people like to write their book and ride off into the sunset, but you're constantly keeping it fresh, and you've got a 5th edition out now. So I think when it comes to execution, again, I got to tell you, project management, my neck of the woods, isn't always the sexiest topic, but it's blocking and tackling for you football players, right? But without the blocking, it's all tackle. And you get the wrong guy tackled.
Right.
Oh, that's a nice analogy there. And just to be clear, Dr. Owens is a football guy. I'm a fan. I was on the safe side of the chalk line. Yeah, so we did a little wrestling. We talk about that, but yeah, he's the football guy. But we'll we haven't made it past the first question. I guess I better stay on our script here. This is great talking to you, Eric. We mentioned a few folks here, Peter Drucker, Steve Jobs, and others, but Teddy Roosevelt. Who do you think exemplifies your definition of leadership? What kind of, who do you look up to for inspiration? Or you mentioned George Washington, but feel free, anyone that you glean information from.
I'll tell you right now, I think of a very exciting leader for me is Stacey Abrams. You look what Stacey Abrams is doing. First of all, courage. I mean, wow, courage, vision, inspirational, and how much has she accomplished? So in a relatively short time, she's made a huge impact. And I'm not talking about her political, when she was running for things, but since she stopped running for political office and started up her Fair Fight program, she's accomplished so much. And so I get excited when I see people like her, because I know that's somebody I'm going to learn from. My whole job is to learn. As you said, Andrew, I've got to stay fresh. I've got to keep it coming and find out what's new. And so I see somebody like her and I think, wow, I'm going to pay attention. I'm going to learn something from her, because let's face it, she's getting stuff done. And I think that one of the things that I find so exciting about her is she is incredibly articulate. Now, inspirational leaders, almost without exception, are able to inspire us through their spoken and written word. You don't find too many examples of non-quotable leaders, right? I mean, Theodore Roosevelt, Abraham Lincoln, these people are well known because they really moved the needle with what they wrote, often because there wasn't a television set in front of them. But so I add communication skills to the list of intentional leaders. But Stacey Abrams is right now top of my list.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. I wouldn't have guessed that, but I can see why you would choose Stacey Abrams, and that's why we bring in great leaders here, Dr. Owens, right, to learn from them. So please take it away.
So let's ask this next question. I mean, to get down to the nuts and bolts of this, when did you realize, or when did you come to the conclusion that you were a leader? How did that happen? Was it an epiphany? Was it playing in the backyard somewhere, or neighborhood game?
And it didn't start out today thinking that the thing was going to be intentional leadership, but that's what it's going to become as you start asking me these questions. And we've talked about this, because I would say that I became conscious of leadership early when I started to work. You go through high school and college and whatever, and I did my things, but I didn't really think too much about leadership till I got out on the job. And I saw very different leadership styles where I was working. You work in a big company, you see different people. And I remember turning to somebody as I walked out of a meeting and say, I got to remember not to do that if I'm ever in a position of power, right? We've all seen that, right? That's like, okay, I'm not doing that. That is not the kind of leader I want to be. And so I started to realize that early in my career that you had choices. I mean, you could be one type of a leader or a different kind of leader. And it was really behaviors. People respond to behavior. You don't know what I'm thinking. You know what I'm saying and what I'm doing. Okay. And so this is the source of a lot of problems. In fact, in communication there's the unintended consequence. I think I'm doing the right thing, and you have the wrong perception. But when it comes to leadership, I realized that early on that I don't know what that person was thinking they were doing, but I know what the impact on me was. And so I would say that, the question you said is, when did I think I became, or when did I realize I was a leader? I don't know if I'm a leader, but I know that leadership is intentional, and that's what I learned. And I'll give you a great example of this. So several years ago, and this might have been even 20 years ago, I think, but I was here in Seattle. I'm already working in the project management space, and there's a local university that wants to have a master's degree in project management. And so the guy who was working at the university tapped a number of us who were in the local community who were active in project management and put together a committee, right? And we met monthly or maybe even weekly at the time for a while, and try to kind of form out what is this thing and get it rolling. Well, I'll tell you, the most influential member of that committee was not the leader, and I don't want to take anything away from the leader, but it was just one of the other participants who was constantly leading from within the group. It was very subtle, but the kinds of things that he said and did were constantly directing us and moving us forward and shaping the conversation. And I watched that and I said, and this guy's name was Steve, and Steve knows who he is because I've told him that, I watched him do that years ago, Steve Widener. Steve showed me that if you know what you're doing, you can lead from any position. And so I try to remember that no matter what kind of role that I'm in. I can be a member of my church choir, but I can be leading with my behaviors. And so it comes back to being intentional and choosing my behaviors. And so that's why I've got a long list, because I can't just choose to be honest. I can't just choose to be cheerful. I got to choose to be all those things that people are looking for in a leader.
That's amazing. I love that quote. If you know what you're doing, you can lead from anywhere. I love that. I'm going to add that somewhere. Hopefully you don't mind.
Now, the first time somebody told me that, I didn't believe him, right? And because I was early in my career and I was a little hungry, right? I was ambitious, and I was like, hey, I think I might be ready, to step into a leadership role. And somebody says to you, oh, you can lead from any position. And I think, what does that sound like to you? It sounds like no, right?
Right.
But with time, I learned that. And it probably, if you have kids, you tell them things that they think that's a dadism, right? That's just it. And finally, though, they realize, oh, maybe that does matter, Right. So that's kind of, for me, that was the first one for me in my career, is that anybody can be a leader. And you just have to, choose that.
Yeah, but I think like you said, but the foundation is you got to know what you're doing, right? You got to put some sweat equity into something. You got to learn how to do something, how to sell something, how to talk to a person, how to talk to the boss, how to, you got to have something in the game before you try to do that. Because like you said, if you know what you're doing, and that's what I think. I mean, I think sometimes, and maybe you can elaborate on this. What do you think, like, about taking that risk of, like, I don't know what I'm doing. Maybe I know how to talk to people, but I don't know how to sell, I don't know, insurance. But if I know how to talk to people, I think I can figure this out.
Yeah, that taking a risk. I do think that leaders take risks, right? I mean, again, show me the leader that doesn't take a risk. So one of the things that I know myself that I had to do is confront my fears early on in my career. I had to realize that too often my fears were shaping my decisions. And so it might be something exactly like what you said there, Sean. I need you to go out and sell something, Eric. And I would think, I'm not a salesperson. I don't know how to do that. And all I could do was see the failure and feel the fear, right? Mm-hmm. And then I began to realize that, I'm acting out of fear here. And so then I began to realize when the fear was bubbling up and I was starting to take control, and I'd be like, oh, here's a fear. Let's not let fear take control of this. In fact, I'll tell you a quick story. So here's my favorite project management book. It's called the Fast Forward MBA in Project Management. It's the first edition of my book, right? And when they asked me to write that book, I had not even published an article. Okay. Was I afraid? Absolutely. And I thought about all the bad things that would happen if I failed. And I was like, okay, let's do it anyway. And I faced my fear. And so I think that, it's intentional. It's self-awareness so that you can make choices.
No doubt. I like that. Dr. McCart, what do you think?
Sure. So our next question really on our list here is another list for you. So if you don't mind, and you've told us several things here about ways and ways of being that leaders should be. And I just, you have done consulting for some very large organizations, Adobe, Boeing, the list goes on and on here out there in Seattle, GE Capital, Lockheed Martin, Nordstrom. What do you think up and coming leaders need to have? Is there anything that we haven't mentioned yet, or maybe you'd want to frame it differently for up and coming leaders that you would like to tell us about we can learn from?
Well, so everything, that we've talked about before, up and coming leaders, boy, that's a long list. And, start with character, because everything that's your foundation. But I would say for up and coming leaders, some things that are going to be different than they've been in the past is we've got pace of change and virtual teams these are two dynamics that didn't exist as to the degree they exist now. Certainly not during Peter Drucker's time, right? Not even during Steve Ballmer's early years at Microsoft. So let's talk about these for just a second. The pace of change. Everything is changing faster and faster. And because of that, it's not enough for us to just be able to have a strategy and a plan and execute. We need to relearn how to do big things in small steps so that and this is really what the Agile methodologies that are so popular in software and IT are about. It's about accomplishing things in a reactive way, in a constantly learning way. So instead of, the way you build a house is you put a plan together and then you dig the hole and you build it, right? And you really don't want to just sort of make it up as you go along or you have a disaster. But a lot of other things in business right now do require us to learn as we go and to react as we go, and require courage to move into the unknown. And so it's one thing to have courage. It's another thing to succeed. And I think that the techniques that you see the most in the IT and software spaces, and certainly in software, big software companies and small startups, is the Agile methodologies that are being used. Those things, that's something that every new leader should pay attention to. And you might say, well, I'm not in software. I don't want to work in software. You know what? There's something to be learned by the incremental delivery and the rapid ability to learn that these Agile techniques are teaching people. So number one, because of the pace of change, I would really emphasize Agile. And I'm going to go back to intentional again in a minute, because virtual teams, we've had virtual teams. We've had, again, when I was working in the 80s, I was on a team that had people all over the country. So I was on a virtual team, and frankly, we struggled with all the things you'd always do it, but they were not the norm. Well, let's face it. We just spent a year working from home, and we all reacted to that, right?
Right.
When we all go back to work, and we're going to still have remote teams, we're still going to have people working part-time, working remotely, and what I think we learned is that if we had a decent culture in the office, we could survive that remote work really well. Okay. I mean, and it's kind of like when my kids went off to college, I had a good relationship with them. They were practical, they had their feet on the ground. So it was new, but they survived the college experience. We stayed in touch, no problem. What's going to be different is as we start to have the norm being remote work and a lot of people not there all the time, is that, again, it's going to be culture. It's going to be, do you have an intentional culture that brings people in, helps them to learn the way you work, and really gets them attached to your business? I was joking with somebody the other day, a young friend in her 20s who had taken on a new job in the last 6 months. And she said, oh, we're starting to lose people, and I'm not sure why. And I said, well, maybe they were working 3 jobs at the same time because they were all remote, right? And so they finally decided which job they wanted. Now, that's probably not true. But the fact is, when we're all remote, we don't really know what's going on. Mm-hmm. And how are that leaders going to make an emotional connection with people? Because when the going gets tough, it's the emotional commitment that we personally have to the task at hand, to the project team, that gets the job done. And we've seen that over and over and over again. Oh, I mean, whether it's the military, whether it's sports, whether it's business, your emotional commitment to your team's goal is what keeps people going through the tough times. How are you going to build emotional commitments to your organization and to the team goal? Or are people really just going to be committed to their paycheck? So I think that's the big challenge coming ahead of us. And that's probably something that the up and coming leader ought to be intentional about.
I love it.
No, thank you for going through that. We really appreciate it. And, I want to just say here too, that you have a beautiful website for the versatilecompany.com. And just so many blog posts. I mean, many different titles. We could dig into any one of those, and that could be a master class for our talk here. I mean, looking at choose a checklist to improve your process, for instance. Just you've got a number of great information out there. So thanks for your generosity in these things that you've done. I would probably add that as well. The idea of generosity on what you've demonstrated here and what we've been able to find about you.
Oh, well, that's kind of you to say that.
Yeah, well, it is. And it's, I want to ask you this and go off the script just a little bit, but we have, I get this question all the time, and you're far more qualified to answer it than I am, but students, we have project management classes in healthcare leadership and in organizational leadership and learning. We're developing a track, which I believe is how or we cross paths. We're using your book with Ron Sheffield, and that's how we sought you out, I believe, if I remember, Dr. Owens.
Right. Yeah, Ron and I connected, and he introduced me to you, right?
Yeah, Ron's great. And so I guess my question is, students ask this, how important is it, and what are the steps involved to get that? And is PMP the right organization? I would guess that there are a number out there, but yours is in PMP. So I guess that's the first question: is PMP the right organization? What does it take to get there? And do you recommend our students and other professionals to get that certification?
Great. Yeah. So PMP certification is Project Management Professional. It comes from the Project Management Institute. Mm-hmm. And so, I'm gonna open up the aperture a little bit here and say, whether it's project management or any industry, there is now a professional association that a student can join once they hit the workforce. And the certifications that come from your industry. So I'm also a member of the learning and development industry, and I can get certification from ATD, which is a learning development association, right? And there are so many associations that offer their professionals, members, a certification. That's where I would pay very much attention to that. And the traditional path to doing that is, first of all, you get your degree, right? The degree is a huge foundation of education, which is really important. And then from that, you start to work. And as you work, you gain experience. And most of these certifications are far easier to earn than a college degree, right? So that's one of the reasons I think that they're beneficial. But they're also reflective of the best of that industry when they're, and they always change. Like, for example, the test you have to pass to get a PMP, that changed just 6 months ago. And it changes every few years because the Project Management Institute, which again is a professional association, they're trying to make it stay relevant. And I think you find this in every industry where you work. And so I really believe highly, and I really encourage your students. Here's what I really encourage your students to do. Think in terms of not just getting a certification, but really to continue their learning. And continue learning. And next thing you know, you'll have a professional certification. You might get a technical one. You might learn some specific tool. And every one of those represents your continued growth. What I find is that I've met some people who are doing so many different interesting things. And where do I meet them? I meet them after hours at the professional association where I'm hanging out. And it might be the learning one, ATD, it might be PMI, it might be something else. But that's where I meet these interesting people who are doing interesting things in my industry. So really encourage all the folks who are, going to school right now, finish the degree. Once you start working, look for the relevant professional association and start hanging out there, because that's where you're going to really find out what's really happening. And you'll probably be able to separate yourself from the rest of the crowd, because you'll be paying attention to people who are passionate about your profession.
That's a great point. And it's often there are a lot of privileges to membership. For instance, I belong to the American College of Healthcare Executives, and they have free webinars, free seminars for members all the time. Their annual meeting had Atul Gawande, who wrote the Checklist Manifesto,
Right.
which I think, the Dr. Fauci was there. Yeah, and I think of, I thought of the Checklist Manifesto when your blog post here, choose a checklist to improve your process, and how important that is, right? And this is Dave Allen, is one of my favorite project management from Getting Things Done. From that book, I consider that in the realm of project management. But yeah, Dr. Owens, I'm starting to nerd out here. I better turn it over to you before I go to our next section.
We're going to nerd out really bad, I think.
Yeah. It's already taken over, right? We've name dropped and book dropped and done all the dropping, right? Said quotes, but you said a very interesting quote that, as we segue into our next kind of subject, and we'll kind of breeze through this one. But you said, pay attention to the people who are passionate about your profession. I think that is an overlooked. It seems to be like it's just overlooked, right? I don't know the word for it. It's just overlooked, because I think a lot of times we're trying to get the degree, we're trying to get the certification, we're trying to get the networking, we're trying to build our brand, we're trying to build this, we're trying to show, build our resume, get all the checks and instead of just like looking up, getting our head out of the saying who's already succeeding in this industry, and then how do I mirror that? Because they're passionate about what I want to do. They're already succeeding, and I'm not there yet. What do you think?
The other thing I would add to that is that when I'm in school, I've got a leader and I've got a very structured path forward. And if I want to get an A in this class, somebody's telling me this is the book you read, this is the paper you write. And if I want a degree, these are the classes you take, and so forth. And once you hit the ground out there in the professional environment, there is no path. There sort of is, and there sort of isn't, right? Mm-hmm. And so you go out and hang out with people that are 10 years ahead of you, or even your peers. My Steve Widener, the guy I mentioned to you earlier, same age as me. We were both newbies in project management when we met at the PMI years ago. But these are people you learn from because they're passionate about what they're doing.
Right. I think that's a very critical, point, especially for the students in the OLL program, because a lot of them they've already went out and done some work, and they're now coming back to get the degree to try and get ahead, or to get the promotion, or whatever the reason is. Maybe it's just something on the checklist to do. And so I think that that's very critical. Like, don't forget to pay attention to the people who are already succeeding in what you want to be, or where you want to go, or if you want to change your career, or whatever the case may be. Don't forget to leave out the people who have done it or are doing it, that you can look up to. But looking up, knowing that, switching gears just a little bit from leadership, and maybe we've already switched those gears, moving over to learning, where Steve Jobs said that learn continually. There's always one more thing to learn. Kind of want to know, like, as a president of a company, how important is it for you to know your personal learning style?
I think it's important because it can be a real blind spot if you don't. And I know for myself, well, first of all, two things. We're a management training business, so we need to understand the concept of learning styles when we design training, right? Or when I write a book. Both of those are examples of products that we have where our customers have learning styles, have different learning styles, and my ability to address all those styles is important. Now, so that's from a product development standpoint. But from a leadership standpoint, I would say that learning styles are very important to me, because I know that I tend to be in a hurry. I want to know it right now. I can be too quick to judge, and I know all those things about myself. And I know that, therefore, I know my blind spots, And so I watch myself make the same mistake over and over, but I'm catching myself before I get too far down the road. So I think that's why understanding my learning style has been beneficial to me.
That's good. That's good. I like that because I don't think anyone's ever said it can be the blind spot. I think we've asked this question to a lot of people, and no one's really said it. But and I think the more I think about it, it probably does become the blind spot. And then from a leadership standpoint, it could probably be more detrimental than more, as you can say, it's not going to be luck. Luck is going to run out at some point in time, and then you're going to be forced to either look at yourself in the mirror or figure out why churn is happening in your organization. We've all heard the saying, people don't leave companies, they leave people. It could be that you're not aware of your blind spot, and that's why people are leaving you. So just
and believe me, I've had people say to me, Eric, the reason we made this mistake is because you did not slow down long enough to learn what was going on. I'm like, thank you for that education. Okay. Yeah. So I learned by the school of hard knocks for sure.
Dr. McCart, you want to chime in on this?
Sure. Well, we say around here, feedback is the breakfast of champions, and that's actually a Ken Blanchard quote. I didn't come up with that, but yeah, it's tough. We want good feedback, but we learn from bad feedback, don't we?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Yeah. We need
it. I was looking up a quote here. Charlie Munger from Berkshire Hathaway says that what you formerly knew is never enough, and I just heard that last week. I've been thinking about it, and he also says here, if you keep learning all the time, you have a wonderful advantage. And just that idea of just staying current, staying fresh. We already talked about that, but we want to ask you a question along learning here, and it is, what are some useful tools that you use to help optimize your career? With some things that you wouldn't mind sharing with us?
Well, so the first one is very much like learning styles, and it's this concept called social styles, and I'm going to guess you two have probably come across this, but for your audience, I'm going to tell you this. I discovered this very early in my career. I was probably 25 years old, and I continue to use it constantly. So the idea of social styles is basically that we don't all solve problems or communicate in the same way. People are different. Well, big aha, right? But I tell you, the first time somebody explains that to you, for me, it was a huge aha. And so here's a perfect example, and this is what I see in every team that I work in and every organization that I work with. I meet these two people, and I'll call them Mr. Facts and Ms. Results. And Mr. Facts is the person who, is detail-oriented, and when he makes a decision, he wants to be right, and he's going to take the time to study it and make sure he understands all the options. Ms. Results is a big picture thinker, and is really focused on getting to an outcome. Like, let's get something done here, and can be in a big hurry. Now, with just that simple example, do you know which one of those you two are?
I think. If I were to guess, you want me to say it? You want me to say it?
Just go ahead. Yeah.
I would say that based off that definition, I would think I would be Mrs. Results, unfortunately. And I think that Andrew would be Mr. Facts.
Does that sound right to you, Andrew?
I'm not going to disagree with Dr. Owens on the air. So yeah, I think so.
So anyway, now, and I say I meet these folks all the time. And the thing is, and they're both right? Because do you not want results?
Right.
Or do you not want details? And so you want what both of them have. And this is why I think this concept is brilliant, because I want Mr. Facts and I want Ms. Results on my team. And you know what? Those two drive each other crazy. Think about that, right? They drive each other crazy because just when you're going to make a decision, and Ms. Results has been made like, okay, at last, we've talked this one through. We're going to make a decision. We're going to move on. And Mr. Facts says, so I've got a couple of more questions for you, right? And there's like, you can just see that Ms. Results like, oh my, how is this possible, right? So the thing is, I love having both these people on the team. Both are critically important. They make critically important contributions. And if they do not understand what the source of their difference is, they will drive each other nuts, and they will not be friends, or they will not be good coworkers. But if you can explain this to them, if you can say, well, your social style is to be more detail-oriented and you take more time to make decisions. Your social style is to be big picture thinking and you're in a big hurry and you want to get results. And you see how either one of those can be a strength, but both can have a blind spot, and they'll be like, oh yeah, I see that. And so when you work with each other and blah, 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 and you work that out, right? And so this concept of social styles, for me has been brilliant. And it's in many ways, it's like learning styles, right? It helps me to interact with everybody effectively. I try to figure out somebody's social style quickly, and then I try to adjust my style so that they want that I understand them and I am adjusting to them. And then I will also say to them something like, so you have to understand, I know you want all the details, but you have to understand that my style is, and I do that. And then we kind of quickly form the bridge. Now, this concept, social styles, has been around for like 50 years, maybe. The original book came out on this in the 70s. And again, you guys have probably heard about this, but I would just say to your audience, if you search for Merrill and Reed, David Merrill, Roger Reed, you get enormous amount of content around this because it's just really valuable. And so I always say, if you work with people, this is your number one concept to put in your pocket. It's simple and it's powerful.
Oh yeah. I think we come to the when we started this, I think we kind of came up with the phrase of let's not let perfection get in the way of excellence. So let's just put out the best product that we can. It doesn't have to be perfect. And I think sometimes you can get caught up in that. Like you want it to be better. It's got to be the best. And me, I'm just like, let's just put it out there, right? Maybe it sinks, maybe it swims. Who knows? Maybe it swims awkwardly, right? Maybe it swims in a circle. I said that, and I think that's kind of how we, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, Andrew, I think that's just kind of how we have navigated that facts versus results. It was just like, let's just put it out there. It may not be perfect. We may not say everything politically correct all the time, but we're definitely not trying to sabotage anything or anybody. So I think we'll be okay. Yeah.
And the fact that there's both of you working and you each bring a different strength, right? That's what makes it beautiful. That's the beauty of it.
And the people have heard me say his Google is better than mine because I can type in something to find research on something and I come back with like 2 things. He'll be like, what? How come you didn't get this article? You didn't know this was out there? Yeah, there's like 17 books. And I'm like, your Google is not my Google.
That's right. That's a great example of it. And as I say, if you ask me what's a useful tool, learn about social styles. Because as a leader, to me, this is like right up front. When we teach a class on how to build a team, this is right up front. You help people. This is a number one team communication skill, is being able to see yourself and see others. And then once you do that, then you begin to form relationships and you can laugh about your differences and you understand what they are. And you realize that Eric's not a bad guy. He's not, he's just different. And we all appreciate each other. So it has so many benefits when people start to realize what this is. They see, they're conscious.
Oh, no doubt. I love it. Man, that's great. Social styles. Maybe we should add that to our questions from here on out. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah. Dr.
McCart, anything?
Sure. Yeah. And that, I think sometimes I find so much stuff on our guests they don't even know is out there, and it's borderline creepy, but I'm a researcher.
Okay.
By training. No, I mean, and these blog posts I keep finding are on the author updates on Amazon.com that you really put a lot of great information out there. So just to close the loop on that, but time is flying and we're having a ball asking all these questions. I may have to jump around a little bit to the ones I really wanted to know, but
go ahead. Sure.
So can you tell us a little bit about your journey to be president of the Versatile company? I mean, I'm looking at your LinkedIn here, and um, 31 years,
Right.
president, founder, leads courseware architect. I mean, that is, entrepreneurship is tough. I don't have to tell you that, but it is, when I read, I was like, okay, great, got his own company, 31 years. Wow. So that tells me, you know what you're doing. You're fair. You have to be fair to the marketplace, fair to your customers, fair to your employees, or you don't stay in business that long, I don't think. So just tell us a little bit about that, your journey, and
Right.
just for some of us that hold on to stable and steady jobs in the university and are afraid to, entrepreneurship means one who takes a risk. I'm personally a little afraid of it. So tell us about it. I hope to learn from you.
Right. Well, the other thing that 31 years in business tells you is that I started when I was 7 years old.
Right.
Yeah.
Clearly.
Oh, okay. So no, it's a great story though. I mean, I appreciate you saying the fairness because I think that really nails it. But so the story is kind of simple, actually. I fell in love early, and I fell in love with training. First company I worked for, big IT corporation. I mean, one of the biggest IT service providers that existed in the 80s when I was just getting out of college. They had a huge internal training operation. And so I did a rotation through there and taught some classes. And I fell in love with the classroom, with being a teacher. I envy you both because that's what you do. But somehow for me, it was being working out in the business that was really where I wanted to teach. It was working with the people who are doing the work. That was really turned me on. So I quickly, I fell in love with that. And that company happened to be headquartered in Dallas, Texas. And the woman that I was in love with happened to be living in Seattle, Washington, where I was working. So I said, easy choice. Married my girlfriend in Seattle, quit my job, found work locally. And really, I'm just very fortunate because quickly I got on with the Boeing company. It's just they hired me as a part-time instructor and said, well, if you get good marks, you can keep coming back. Well, I got good enough marks. I kept coming back. Within a couple of years, I had a few more other training contracts locally, and just kind of the ball started to move forward. We hired some other people to help me out. We did a good job. Our reputation stood up. And over time, we just were able to get more and more business. And I, hired people. And as you say, Andrew, treat the people fairly that you're working for and working with. And here we are. So it's been, and you nailed it. It's one thing to be in love with training, but to run a business takes a lot of learning, a lot of trial and error.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's just even that it, for whatever reason, that continuity, 31, that impressed me. And so you may have started when you were 7. That's even more impressive. Maybe there's a lemonade stand in the first iteration, but no, that's great. And thank you for telling us about that. Well, Dr. Owens, let me turn it over to you.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to, for all of our students out there, if you're enrolling in the project management course, Eric's book is going to be the book we roll out and we ride or die with, as we say around here. So can I ask you some questions about the book?
Sure.
But more so detailing it, like what are some good and bad examples of project management? I don't know if they're in the book. I don't think we've got the copies here yet by bulk order, but what are some good and bad examples of project management?
So I only focus on good examples in the book. Okay.
Great.
It's a lot more fun to have positive examples, and it's more fun to learn from a positive example. So I'll give you a quick, 3 quick examples. So first of all, when you say a good example of project management. So as I say, we've been talking to professionals for many, many years about this, and we come up with 5 project success factors. Mm-hmm. And so if you can have these 5 factors on every project, then you at least have the odds in your favor. So let me just quickly cover these, right? They're a clear goal. You know what you want to do, you know why you want to do it, and so does everybody else involved, right? Your boss, your team. You have a plan. So you know how you're going to get there, how you're going to get it done. and who's going to do the work, and they know it, and so a clear plan. Good, strong communication. And again, communication's intentional, right? So anybody who's involved, you're thoughtfully communicating with the right people at the right time. The fourth one is to maintain focus on the goal. And that's kind of funny that, we start with goal and then maintain focus. But the problem is on many projects, after we agree on the goal, we start wandering in the desert. And so a major success factor is what we call controlled scope, which is really just staying focused on the goal and not letting everything wander. And then strong support from management. So when you talk about what's good project management, what's bad project management, that's good project management. You do those 5 things. And really that's what the book is about. Now, I got a story because in my most recent edition, we interviewed people in the entertainment industry and asked them about project management. So I got a great story from Stuart Lyons. Stuart was he was a producer on Breaking Bad, and so as a producer, kind of the way he described it is he does everything off screen so that everything in front of the camera goes well. Now, he had a story that he told me. He said he's working on a movie and there's a secret agent who's going to take a bag full of weapons and stow them in a bus terminal. And of course, this is a bus terminal in a foreign country. It's not in the US. And so, Stuart Lyons reading the script, looking at that description, there's no dialogue. There's just this action. And he looks at this and he says, wow. So we're going to go to a foreign country, find a bus terminal, get hundreds of extras to be in the background for this scene, control all the signage, make sure we have the right vehicles in the shot, all for a few minutes of a scene. Is going to be incredibly expensive. And there's no dialogue. What if instead we have the secret agent go out into a desert and bury the bag in a special spot? And so he tells this to the director buys it. They save $250,000. Wow. And it doesn't hurt the movie's just fine, right? It doesn't hurt the story. Now, the reason I love that story is that is exactly what executives expect from project managers. They expect them to think, to look at what's going on, think about it and say, is this really going to add value? Are we going to spend $250,000 in a way that's going to move our project forward? And so in this case, Stuart Lyons looked at that and he collaborated. He got out of his, he didn't just do what they said. He looked at it and goes like, I think this is a better way to spend your money. So that's a good example. Now, let me just say the bad example. I'll share one bad example with you. And it is that, and again, I try not to focus on bad things too much because it's easy to throw stones at failed projects. But in the past year, during the pandemic, we saw a lot of people denying facts, denying science, depending upon wishful thinking to make hugely important decisions. And so I would just say that denying facts is bad project management. Gotcha. Wishful thinking is bad project management. And I understand that this isn't the first time in history that people have ignored facts and relied on wishful thinking. That does happen all the time. This just happens to be very well publicized. And, the tragic results are very well known. Right. That's bad project management.
Wow. That right there was worth, never mind. Go buy the book. Go buy all the books. Read all the editions. Right? Shameless plug on my part, on Eric's behalf. Go buy the book. Go buy the book. Even if you don't take the class, those 5 points right there are worth everything. Dr. McCart, you want to chime in?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Eric, for that. It's that's idea of, and that story of cutting the cost and not impacting the quality and Breaking Bad. I was a big fan of Breaking Bad and even watched Better Call Saul just because I was such a fan of the spinoff show. So thank you for that. And
now you'll never be able to watch those shows without thinking about project management. So I kind of ruined it maybe for you, right?
No, that makes it even better.
Better or worse?
Better. It makes a more richer experience for, again, I'm a project management nerd. So It's a very technical. This is a little spin on this question that we have. But project management is a skill, very technical, can be. But there's also this relationship aspect, and there's the people aspect. And you were talking earlier about the idea of professional organizations. And for instance, I belong to the American Society for Quality and study their Six Sigma curriculum. But I think of the Toyota production system, and there is the continuous improvement and the respect for people. And so it can often be in that field that the continuous improvement happens, but they forget about the respect for people. And so the long run up to my question is relationships in project management. Are they important? How important are they? Do you see that as a dynamic that's worth paying attention to in project management?
So very insightful question, Andrew. Thank you. Because in project management, you can get caught up in the nuts and bolts. There are so many processes. There's so many techniques. There's so much jargon that you can get caught up in all that, and you forget that projects get done by people. Okay, and actually, here's I think the real dynamic that we need to understand, that every project is a change, and so because it's a change, and that means there's going to be discoveries. There's going to be problems to be solved. In fact, in many projects, it's just day after day. It's like, okay, what are we going to do about this? What are we going to do about that? How are we going to design it? Should we go with an Apple product or a Microsoft product? You know what? I mean, it's just constant decision making, right? So when you have projects that are constantly about making decisions and solving problems, if you have positive relationships, things are going to go 2 to 3 times better than if you do not, right? If you have friction, if you've been more focused on the schedule than the people, and you get a bunch of disengaged people and you're trying to solve an important problem, is that really how you want to solve an important problem, with people that are like, I've had it with you, just get me out of here? No, you want people who are excited, who trust each other. I mean, that's what makes teams really exciting. And I hate to pound my book too hard, but really there's a whole new chapter in my 6th edition on this topic of the importance of trust in teams, so that you have dynamic, exciting teams that are fun to work on and that make good decisions together.
Oh, great points there. And, in projects and in any organization, you're going to have friction and conflicts. And when there's a good relationship, I feel like those can be worked out. But when there's a bad relationship, then it doesn't, there's a book out there, The Speed of Trust, that we talk about sometimes. And it just slows things down. We can work through anything if there's a good relationship, but if there's not a good relationship, there's even the smallest hiccup will stop a project dead in its tracks, from my experience.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, we with the right people and the right relationships, we work through the problems. Absolutely.
Sorry about that.
Well, Dr. Owens, there's that time in the show whenever I say that you're known as the fun one. You've got the fun questions, the rapid fire, the energy, the motivation. I've asked all the technical, nerdy questions I can, and I better just hand it over to you for a bit.
All right, no problem. Eric, we couldn't let you get out of here with having a little fun with you. We've delved and dived into leadership and to learning, and even got into project management. Probably scared some of our students from the project management course, but hopefully we made it more exciting nevertheless. So today, before we let you go, we'd definitely like to have a little fun with you. And the first thing we do is we have what we call rapid fire. These are just 5 questions I'm going to ask you, and you can just answer them with the first things that come off the top of your head. And that's how we go. Are you ready for rapid fire?
Let's go.
Here we go. Rapid fire, round 1, first question. Let me pull up here. Here we go. If you could pick one word that would describe your life so far, what would it be and why?
I would say that I'm lucky. Lucky describes me. I've been blessed. I grew up in a great family, loving parents. I still hang out with my brothers. I've got a great family now. I've been married for 31 years, and I've got 2 great children I spend time with. So, and I'm lucky to do the work that I do because, you know, I like being on my own. It's risky, but it's also fulfilling. I get to do creative work.
Gotcha. I love it. Right? Great word, by the way. Great word. You pass round one, we'll go into round two. What are 3 non-negotiable characteristics that anyone on your team or tribe has to have?
So first is integrity. We talked about character before. Integrity. Integrity is kind of a one strike and you're out deal in our business, because if we catch you doing something that shows you don't have integrity, it means that's not the first time you made that mistake. Probably it's just the first time we caught it. That's it. Mm-hmm. And I'd say the second one is respect for teammates. And there it's a 2 strikes and you're out. First time we call you on it. Make sure you're aware of what the problem is. Second time, it's it. Because that just ruins the environment. And that's it. I've only got 2 non-negotiables.
Okay, 2 non-negotiables. I like it. Those are great non-negotiables, by the way. You successfully passed round 2, on to round 3. I think I know this answer, but what is your favorite hobby?
My favorite hobby is music. I don't know how long ago, but I met some buddies through my church choir, and we started sitting around and playing guitar and singing songs, and we just love it. And we do it whenever we can. And we just go on and on, singing those old folk songs, classic rock, country songs. We just enjoy the moment, just hanging out together, singing and just playing whatever we bring.
I love it. I really thought it was going to be skiing from our earlier conversation, so that's why I thought I knew this answer. You got me. All right. You passed round 3, round 4. If you weren't president of your own company, what would you be doing as a career?
Okay, so anybody in my business, which is where you get to stand up in front of people and tell them stuff, it's basically that's second place to actually being on the stage. So I'd rather be on Broadway or be in front of leading on the front man on a country band. But second place was lead my own company in the training business.
That's not a bad second place. It's not a bad runner-up. Not a bad runner-up.
You know what, though? Honestly, I think at least half the people on my team that are professional trainers have spent time on the stage, and you know, so that's part of that excitement that we get of being in front of the room is some of the excitement that we get on the stage.
That is amazing. All right, last question, rapid fire. Here we go. If you could sit with your 13-year-old self, what would you tell him?
So that's a 7th grader. I'd say you are loved. You've got a great family. And the most important thing in life is who you love and who loves you. That's the most important thing. And I would say that, you know, there's going to be challenges in life. And if you have a challenge, do your best. And if you do your best, you'll have nothing to regret. And I would also say, be sure you have fun.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have fun in this life, I'm not sure which life you'll have fun in.
Got it. Those were great answers, by the way. Now, my last question, my truly fun question is, I'm torn because you're already the author of a book, but this is the question that has stumped every guest, all 20 plus of them. So I think I'm going to throw this out there just to see how it works. So here it is. If your life was the title of a book, made up or real, what would it be and why?
You know, so many years ago, when I was in college, we had to write an essay about ourselves. And I said, Eric is an artist. So I would say the title of the book is Eric is an Artist. I think what I love most, and whether it's playing music with my friends or writing a book, it's the creative part of my job that I love the most. And so that's what it would be. Eric is an artist.
I love it. That's amazing.
Let me add that this is just the kind of exciting, creative part of my job that I love too. So thank you. This has been so fun.
So no problem. So before we let you get out of here, totally, right? If you had anything, wise counsel, one word, thought, whatever, to kind of guide all of our listeners who will hear this far and wide for the rest of 2021, what would that message be?
I just repeat what we started with, which is that your success is up to you. Be intentional. Choose to be the best, have the best attitude on the team, or choose to do your best at whatever you do. We don't always, we don't get to choose our circumstances or our situation. We do get to choose our reaction. Be intentional.
Eric, this was an amazing interview. Dr. McCart, you got anything before we let Eric get out of here and go change the world that he's already started changing?
Well, that last thing you just said there, Eric, this if you can't change the event, you can change your response. That's another way. And that's, I was just going over this last week with some folks, and I try to remember, I don't know if you ever feel this way, but I'm up there training or talking that I'm actually talking to myself. These are things either that I'm still working on or that really had to work on, and now I feel like I've got something to offer back on that. But it was this idea of responsibility is the ability to respond, as simple as that sounds, but you've got a choice in the matter. And it's, when you're reacting, you're the victim of a circumstance and you're just doing whatever unconsciously comes to mind. But that idea that you just mentioned there of choosing something different, changing the way that you react or respond to a situation. I forget exactly the way you said it, but it was great there. And I think if we remember we've got that choice, we don't have to do what's common. We don't have to do what a lesser version of ourselves would do just because it's more comfortable. But we can choose a better way of being if we consciously and have that intentionality, which you started our conversation off with. So I'm going to write that down, and I'm going to take that with me and put it on a big Post-it note right here on my monitor. That's
awesome. And let me just add, the coda to that is easier to say than to do. It kind of, to your point there, is you're talking to other people, you're really talking to yourself. Easy to say, not easy to do. So that's I'm still learning.
Well, I would say that is, you've given us so many great quotes today, so many great insights. We definitely want to have you back on the podcast. I'm not sure when we will do that, but we will definitely keep you in contact, because this was a great conversation. This is something that we can use in our classrooms. I mean, I'm sure this podcast will be used in the classroom, but it's something that, and we can keep going at this all day and all night, but we definitely don't want to take any more of your time today. So Eric, thank you for being on the CardinOLL podcast today. We appreciate all your insight, and we will have you back on the podcast again.
That sounds like something that I would love to do. You guys have, this is a great program. I appreciate your energy and your creativity, and I appreciate the opportunity to be involved. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. McCart, we hit the biggest home run we could have ever hit by bringing Eric on here today. What do you think?
No, that was great. You kicked it off in the intro with he's the subject matter expert for subject matter experts. And, I think that's a good way to say that. And it's really one of the objectives for this podcast, which he asked us about, how did we start doing this? And I think could be as simple as that we want to learn from world-class leaders. And I do teach a class on project management. I feel like I help a lot of healthcare leaders with that, but he is someone that I would go to for information on this, and just did for an hour. So what a great guest. And we'll see if the department can buy us a copy of his book.
Most definitely.
But we will buy one. We won't go to the library and rent it. I think it's there's a lot of good information there that really would love to, as a way of learning and growing, but also saying thanks to our guests for being here. So, what did you think? I loved it.
Man, I learned so much today, man. I mean, you see all my scribbles and chicken scratches all over my paper today, man. I love learning about social styles. If you know what you're doing, you can lead from anywhere. I mean, so many great quotes. it's really too much, right? To do a recap of this is almost to do a whole nother show, right? Let's be honest. His 5 factors: clear goals, clear plans, clear communication. Go back and refocus on the goal, and then get your management support from those are kind of the tenets of his book. I mean, it's a lot. It's really too much to really recap, and that's crazy to sound, right? It's crazy to say you have too much information to recap.
Well, and we use the book in a 15-week class, or maybe it's an 8-week condensed class, but it's a 3-credit long class, so there's a ton of content in there. So, yeah, I think that was great. I guess you took out the favorite dessert question. I was kind of went to the gym today, feel like I earned a dessert. I was kind of wondering what Eric would say, but we'll have to get him on next time and ask.
Most definitely. So, to all our listeners out there, we want to thank you for joining us today. You can check out this podcast as well as any of our other podcasts at uofl.me/leadership-pod. Again, that's uofl.me/leadership-pod, right? So, listen, ladies and gentlemen, right? If you know you need to get that degree, if you have some college and no degree, we hope to see you in the classroom, either virtually or on campus, to get a degree that gets you ahead. We have online bachelor's and master's, as well as certificate leadership programs in a wide range of industries, from healthcare to education to human resources. You can get all that information at uofl.me/podcast-OLL. Again, that's uofl.me/podcast-OLL. And as we say around here, you can count the number of seeds in an apple, but you can't count the number of apples in a seed. When you teach, you never know how many lives you will influence. So, Cardinal Nation, keep leading, keep learning, and keep influencing. We hope to see you soon. But until then, don't forget to like, subscribe, and download the podcast in any of our platforms: Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor, or check us out on YouTube every Friday so that you are well aware of all the information that's happening in the OLL program as we begin and head into the fall to start classes, as well as any information that you want to learn about finishing that degree that you're going to need. So until then, take care and stay safe.